Hello, welcome to our chat today. My name is Britnee Foreman, and I'm really excited to moderate a day in the life streaming. Music streaming keeps growing and growing, which means there's more opportunities to engage in this part of the business more than ever. Today, we're going to talk about what skills are needed for streaming and tech careers, what goes on day to day for execs in this field, and I'm really excited to introduce our panelists. I just want to reiterate again, if you have a question during our chat, just pop it in the Q&A and we'll have time for it after. So let us get started. Let's welcome Theo, Soy, and Nina. I'm really excited to chat with you guys. We're going to do some quick intros and let you guys introduce yourselves. We'll start with who you are, where you're based, how you fit into this discussion, and kind of like, I'm going to throw this in there, what you're passionate about outside of music, because we're all full people. So to get the audience to like kind of hear who we are as people. We'll start with Theo.
Sweet. Hey, everybody. Great to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Theo. I help lead our artist marketing team here at TIDAL. I'm based in New York City, born and raised here. I fit into the discussion being fairly new to the music tech space myself. Most of my background is as an entrepreneur and a music manager, first and foremost. And excited to be taking some of that skill set and applying it to my role here. And a hobby outside of work or an interest outside of work. I really would love to get a private pilot's license at one point in my life. I've always had a fascination with aviation. So would love to explore taking some lessons and jumping up into the skies at some point. So yeah, that's me.
It's great. You will soar high. That is a very corny pun. Next, we'll go with Soy, and then we'll end with Nina.
Amazing. My name is Soy. I'm a creator product marketer at Spotify based in New York City. And I work at the intersection of creator monetization, music marketing, and tech strategy, aka building tech. And I also serve as a leader for Space, which is Spotify's Asian and Pacific Islander employee belonging group of over 600 employees. And I collaborate on strategic programming and partnerships to drive API awareness, such as AAPI Heritage Month and our partnership with Goldhouse to make sure that more API artists can have a career. And prior to Spotify, I worked in record labels as well as a film business in the US and Korea. I love this question about what else we love outside of work. I am a huge sports nerd. I'm very into Formula One and the English Premier League. Shout out Tottenham. And I'm also very passionate about building community and learning new languages.
Great. We'll round out with Nina.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. My name's Nwofia. I'm an account director and commercial strategy at Ingrooves Music Group. Ingrooves is an independent distributor for independent record labels. And so every day I work between the labels and our team internally. And I also work with Spotify mainly, but also strategy around all the different digital streaming platforms, kind of helping to get the support for all of these exciting releases, seeing where they fit editorially, where they fit in their audience, all of that. Outside of work, it's kind of actually what kind of brought me into this space. Really am passionate about how art shapes like voices and cultures. I'm an immigrant, so I was kind of taught by watching TV and just kind of like learning what American culture was. And so I'm very passionate about that intersection and like watching how people react to pop culture and where those audiences are impacted the most in real life. So yeah, great to meet you all.
That's amazing. And I would love to hear more about it. I guess we got to get started on a day in the life. So let us just kind of do a rundown what your career in streaming currently looks like. I know that some of you have like moved around. What does your day-to-day look like? Whoever wants to go first. Rock, paper, scissors. Either one.
I don't mind starting. Basically, we work with a bunch of labels on their release strategy and also on their releases frontline. And so every day we're looking at, for example, this week I'm really concerned about 8/11. That's the Friday coming up, that release day, and what's going to happen that day, but also in the next coming weeks, and like how we're scheduling that out, what we're really going to be focusing on as far as a priority in those days. And so a lot of my days are focused on really that kind of catching up on communication, checking in on marketing requirements for things like playlist covers and things like, billboards and other fun marketing activations that happen with DSPs, and working between artists, and also just working with the label teams and making sure that they're ready for a release day and they're ready ahead of that so that they can land where they want and kind of get what they're expecting. In a nutshell, my day revolves around a multitude of those things. It could be meetings, it could be internal meetings, external. That would explain it.
No, that's cool. That's a great rundown. Soy?
Yeah, so I built go-to-market strategies and launched Spotify for Artists products, which are basically tools that Spotify has developed to help artists and their teams build their audiences on our platform and reach new listeners. Some of the tools that you may have seen as a user of Spotify would be like that full screen takeover, which is called Canvas, that 8-second looping video. But basically, all that type of technology that is going to help an artist better connect with their fans is what our team is building. So it's interesting because product marketing, I think, at a music label is very different from product marketing in tech. But in tech, when we talk about product, we're talking about software and technology. So that's the kind of work that I'm doing. And my work also involves educating artists on these Spotify for Artists tools. There's a lot of them, and it can be really confusing if you're an artist and you're kind of like learning about it for the first time. Maybe you don't know what the best practices may be. So a lot of our work as product marketers is actually to hear what the pain points are, kind of synthesize those, and then build the messaging that helps break it down so that it's really easy for anyone to understand, from your DIYs to artists that are signed to really great labels, and making sure that as a company, we have a cohesive messaging. So depending on what team is going out and talking to the artists, that they all have the same same voice and same message.
Oh, that's great. I love it when people understand what we're going for so that we can all do the best that we can. Theo, let's hear about a day in the life of Theo.
Of course. A lot of my my day to day is somewhat similar to Soy's, being another DSP. So as an artist marketing manager, my role also revolves around collaborating with artists on go-to-market strategies, utilizing some of TIDAL's own platform features to enhance their visibility. But in general, the day to day varies pretty greatly, whether it's data analysis, brainstorming creative campaign ideas, nurturing relationships with artists and their managers, and even more specifically, we're also focused on launching or sort of relaunching our own emerging artist program called TIDAL Rising. So that's another exciting opportunity to work with artists to bolster some of their upcoming release campaigns and identify ways that we can also provide meaningful education to artists, but more specifically around how to navigate the business that is music and entertainment, as opposed to a specific focus on some of our product features. I do that, of course, as well, but in tandem with some other teams, less so on a day-to-day. So a lot of meetings, but super engaging and always fun when an artist comes in to visit. I'm actually currently in our brand new office space in New York City, in our listening room. So it's always a good time when artists come by as well. It's a good excuse to avoid the meetings.
Yeah, I love it. I love it so much. Okay, so we are kind of dig a little bit deeper, touching on what Theo just talked about, like artist relations and the music teams. What are the other various teams at digital streaming services that Soy and Theo will come into contact with?
Go for it, Soy.
Oh my gosh, I'm like, where do I start? We have over 8,000 people across the entire world. I was going to say country, and I was like, that's not right. Continent, that's also not right. It's massive here. And so when I talk about Spotify, I find that it's really helpful when I break it down as having 3 types of consumer bases. So the first is users of Spotify. So people like me and you who might be listening today, people who use Spotify to listen to content. So that's one cohort. The second consumer base are artists and their teams who share their content with our platform. So the people who are providing the content that we can listen to. And then the third customer base are businesses that Spotify engages with at a B2B higher level. The work that I do is in service of that second group that I just talked about, artists and their teams. And the functions are wide and vast across our company. So there are people who work on the music side, people like music marketers who are working across new releases, or those billboards you might see in the wild, bringing together cool music programs, artist and label partnerships, commercial partnerships who are dealing with central labels, and editors who build those playlists. There's also a huge side of the company called R&D, research and development, aka the tech side. And that cohort of people are working on building the platform that we're all using when we tap into Spotify. So these people are the people who make sure that when you open your app, there's something to do. And so those people are the engineers, tons of engineers, product managers, product marketers like me. And then, of course, there's all these other functions like sales and account managers, business strategy, legal, finance, press, comms, and more. So it's massive. And there's HR, there's DEIB, there's just a lot going on. And I share that because I think when you think about a DSP, you might think there's only one type of work. But when you realize how big it is, it's pretty exciting. And to be like, wait, I could see myself fitting into maybe like 7 or 8 of those categories.
Absolutely. Theo?
Yeah, fairly similar as well. TIDAL is small but mighty. Needless to say, we are a part of. We were recently acquired by Block, which is a global financial services company. So in that same sense, we're all sort of working collaboratively. It's vital to our operations here at TIDAL. So working with teams, on the product side, finance and strategy, legal, communications. Content licensing teams. It's a pretty wide gamut, but again, all to ensure that our strategies do align with TIDAL's overall vision and goals. And we're really focused on building new tools and services for artists to enable them to further think of themselves as entrepreneurs. So excited to bring some of those things to market. Yeah.
That's amazing. It's so great. And Nina, I haven't forgotten about you. So let's talk about on the label and distribution side. How do you work with those teams, and what are some of your duties on this end of the industry equation?
For the most part, we're working with the artist and label partnership teams, and sometimes in different DSPs, they might be called marketing teams or something like that. But usually, they are assigned to help work with us directly around our releases and our catalog, and kind of making sure that we're all getting the coverage that we that is deserved based on the size of the artist or the reputation and how they built their audience. And so that's really the main day-to-day. And then on top of that, we'll also be very knowledgeable about the editorial teams as well, and kind of know where they're sitting, and to make sure that we're updating them on a somewhat regular basis, making sure obviously to not badger anyone, because that's something that is super important on this side of working with things. They get people reaching out to them a lot. And so as a distributor, we really want to be sure that when we're reaching out to them, it's something that is actually important, that they actually need to pay attention to and not abuse that. And so that's what we're doing. And internally, we're working with our label and artist teams. We have a label management team that works directly with the labels that we sign. And they're the ones who really kind of communicate with them on a daily basis. And we're communicating with the label team to kind of make sure there's an understanding of like what is priority and how that they can be in the best shape for release day. And so it's kind of across the board where we're working between the artists and label teams. And then on top of that, we're also working with the DSPs as well, and making sure that everyone has what they need to make sure release day, everyone's happy.
Yes, amazing. So let's kind of more tailor it more towards the students. So let's chat about what should someone who's in school right now or outside do in order to eventually get into these type of careers? Big question. I'll start with Nina.
First thing that comes to my mind is research is probably step one, right? And looking into where you want to work in the industry, even if that's internal research, just knowing what you like and what you don't like, and what kind of makes your brain start moving and what makes it stop and say, okay, I don't want to go in that direction anymore. And then also is interning and kind of really making sure that you're there's alignment there, and you're interning where you're going to build experience so that when you do end up graduating, hopefully you have enough experience to get the sort of role that you want to get. And so those are the two things. And I would say with internships, obviously use a lot of discretion around how you're applying, what works best for you, what you're getting out of it. Those are the two things.
All right. Theo or Soy, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I find this question so interesting because, not to totally date myself, but when I was in college, Spotify didn't exist. And so I say that because music is changing rapidly, and I think that's super exciting and one of the best reasons for why someone should want to jump in. And in that way, it should also probably be exciting for you to think maybe by the time you are entering the workforce, there's going to be something new that I don't even know about yet, right? And so, just to build on Lena's point, I think the best thing that you can do is, rather than thinking about like a destination as a place you want to go, think about the type of work and the type of conversations you have, or the way that you interact with people, like what really brings you to life. And that might help you figure out the function, because no matter what company you're at, as 10 years, 20 years go on and things get more digital, platforms come and go, the function you're doing and the person that you are, you can always bring that regardless of what company you're at. And the company becomes less important, and it becomes more about who are you and like what do you bring to the table. And so I'd really recommend, think about the people that you look up to. Why do you look up to them? What are the jobs that sound interesting to you? Go and try it. Even if it's not your dream company, if it's not your dream function, you're going to learn a transferable skill. And especially if it's not a match, you can learn a lot from why you don't like a place too, right? And so I just hope that really encourages you as you think about what's next, to know that there's actually no wrong way to go. And all of us are really building our careers pretty much in hindsight, where it's like, oh, that thing I did 3 jobs ago is now coming back to where I am now, and this is why I'm able to do it. I can really think about it that way. I still think I'm very much on a long journey ahead too.
Yeah,
I love that.
That is great. Sorry, Theo, did you have something to add?
No, I love the advice that both of you guys gave. I studied music business in college. Had a sense that I wanted to explore the artist management world, and tried to put myself out there as much as possible. My goal was really just to immerse myself in the music industry, in the culture that existed in Philadelphia, where Drexel is based. And it was in college that I started my first management company. And that was a really unique experience in and of itself. But it is so true, looking back in hindsight, I never could have necessarily imagined that I would end up sort of on the other side of the coin, working at a DSP instead. And my ethos has really always been to champion and educate artists at really any stage in their career, and sort of to be able to do that same sort of thing, not as a manager anymore, but in service of a major streaming platform, is really special. So yeah, just wanted to echo again what Soy and Nina both said. Yeah,
great. And then we're talking about students, but I would like to know, what non-academic skill do you think is most beneficial to you in your role? We'll start with Soy, because it seems like you might have an answer already.
Oh no, I don't have an answer. I was panicking. Non-academic skill. I would say I can really think of 2. One is, I am probably one of the most curious people I know. I have so many questions about everything. And I think it's like a really good skill set to have, because that means that even as things change rapidly in our business, as companies come and go, as companies are bought, as new players rise up, it's, instead of reacting to those things as, oh my God, why is this changing? I'm always thinking, okay, so what does that mean? Like, what can we do next? Like, how do we build on that? And that's not really anything you can learn in a school. I think it's just like an innate way of thinking that you can build through every job. And a lot of that for me was almost like I had to gain that, because my first job out of college, I actually ended up moving to Korea, and I had to learn how to work in a totally different country in my second language. So I felt really silly and confused all the time my first year out of college. And I think that that's something that you can just continue to foster. And the role models and leaders that I really look up to, even though they're like 20, 30 years beyond me, and they're so skilled at what they do, and everyone in the business knows them, I've just found that they still ask questions, and they're still really curious about what's next. So I don't know if that's a non-answer, but that's kind of what came to mind first.
No, that's a great answer. That is essentially what I'm looking for. Like, what skills do you innately have that you feel help you in your role? So Nina, let's move over to you. What non-academic skill do you possess that's beneficial?
I'm gonna say maybe act, and the reason I will say that is based on like the nature of what we're working with. We're working with music, and that is art, and we're dealing with independent labels and independent artist teams, and they are very attached to it. Depends often, on who we're working with. Some are really bigger teams, and they're very easy to it's very easy to tell them, very explicitly what works and what doesn't, and whether the audience that you were thinking of really doesn't actually fit. And for others, it's really not the same. And then also really just keeping in mind like everyone else's workload. And a lot of times there's a lot of requests coming from a lot of different people. And I have to know that, my rep at DSP is a human being, and that at the end of the day, they have to get prioritized and get to what they can. And what I'm asking them for, I have to kind of consider what else they're working with. So I would say that really has helped, because in the communication day to day, I have to sometimes very quickly come up with a nice way to say, hey, this is your audience is older than you think they are, or this is a bit, this isn't necessarily working to the 2020s, and find a really good way to say that, and also, see the value in the art and like re-emphasize that to the person, so it comes across very sincerely, and so I think that's probably one of the bigger ones.
No, that's a good one, especially when you have to let people down gently and get them to continue moving. Theo, how about you?
Certainly, again, definitely want to echo what you both said. I would say two others: relentless optimism and sort of adaptability. Right, the music industry, as we mentioned, is ever evolving. So being able to sort of pivot and adapt and be open minded to new trends and technologies and user behaviors is key. Right, and also humility too. I think we are all, again, in this industry that is ever evolving, and it's a really small but mighty industry. To have such a meaningful impact on culture, being at these companies and involving ourselves in whatever initiatives we're involved in, is so special. So obviously don't take that for granted either. Yeah, short and sweet.
No, that is the best. So touching on personal experience, as we have a lot of students who clearly haven't worked in streaming before, what is something that surprised you in your role in streaming? Like when you came in, you're just like, oh, I would not have thought about this from the outside. That you can share with our guests today.
Sure, I can jump in, kick this one off. So working at TIDAL is actually effectively my first sort of corporate leaning music tech job. Most of my experience, as I mentioned, has been primarily entrepreneurial to date. I started a management company in college, graduated, was able to run that business full time, started a small label venture as well with Sony and the Orchard. So a lot of that work in partnership with my colleagues at that time was really focused around creating process and procedure ourselves, because nobody was there to set that structure for us or for me. So stepping into an environment like this that is so technology driven, there's a lot more formality. There's a lot of reading and writing, a lot of documentation. So that's been a huge eye opener for me. So in some ways, I feel like I almost have just graduated, and I'm just open minded to learning and understanding how we like to do things here, and optimizing my thoughts and my approach to what our shared goals are here at TIDAL. So that's been a particularly interesting experience for me, and yeah, I'll throw that in there to start.
Yeah, Nina.
I wasn't. I didn't know so much that how much editorial and marketing coverage was, how much of an impact it was on an artist, on their entire catalog and on their career and how they grow. I really am understanding now, talking more with labels directly and more with artists, and seeing honestly even how they individually react and like what they're really looking for. That's a little bit different. I think that I knew that we were in a different climate when it comes to streaming, and that from what I knew, everything was sort of like word of mouth. But if you actually look at a lot of the different platforms, there's sort of a community for every little subgenre that you could think of. And because of that, there are expectations for some sort of like acknowledgement in those places. And that is kind of a little bit different, because when I was growing up, it was, 107.5 The River or something that happened where everyone was excited to hear like the song was finally being played, or if it got played on this particular show, or watching TRL or 106 in Park. And now we have these new sort of like almost dictators, and like not even necessarily dictators, but just new platforms to like look for and say, okay, whoa, this is what is actually popping right now. And that's a little bit, that was something I had to kind of get exposed to as I got into the role.
All right. And we'll round out with Soy.
Yeah, I'm thinking about kind of two things that really surprised me. One was the sheer amount of like tech speak that people had. This was my first role in pure technology. Prior to this, I was not an engineering person. I was not a science or math whiz. Like, I was sociology, screenwriting, worked in the film business. I had no business being here. And when I first got here, it was just like, whoa, this is a different language. I literally don't know. But people were so kind and would break everything down. And the documentation system that we have was so fascinating to me, where I was used to working really like around the clock for artist releases. You don't have time to necessarily document everything when you're working in a medium that is changing in real time, right? But here you'd come here and you have to ask a question, and they'll be like, oh, here's a Word doc for it. Actually, here's an entire drive of all the different times we address this problem with all the different timestamps, and you can go in and learn and see why people made the decisions they did. It's fascinating, and this is something that you'll see at almost every tech company. It's the structure of how these companies work, because they believe in a process called iteration, where they will launch the first the smallest version of a product possible and test that in market and continue to iterate, change, and evolve. And so you can actually go back all the way to 2015 here and see how products were created. So that was fascinating. And then the second part would be we have the ability to just see data and trends from all around the world. I think we're going to talk about data later on in this conversation, so I won't get all in the weeds yet. But it is just fascinating and really humbling to understand like just how many different people are connected through those platforms, and the many like subgenres that Nina was mentioning, and tastes that are curated on this platform. So I'm just nerding out every day, learning about a new genre I didn't know existed.
Yeah. And now that you've touched on it, we'll just go ahead and segue. How does data and analytics play a role in your decision-making process, and what kind of data do you typically work with? And we'll start with Soy, since you kicked it off.
Sure. So whenever we launch a product here, we do a ton of A/B testing. And so this is just terminology, but basically when you're launching a product, you're going to start from something called the alpha test. So the smallest possible cohort of users to bring them in, get them to test the new version, but you might test 1 and 2 versions at the same time. And through that, actually get feedback to understand what works better. Because everything we launch, it has to work for the artists and their teams. We don't care about if it works for us. If it's not working for the users of our platform, then we failed. And so we're looking at that type of user testing data. After that, we might scale it to a beta, and then we might scale to general access, which means everyone in the world has access to it as long as they're an S4A user. We're also looking at data in terms of, what are user behaviors? What are listeners doing? How can we make sure that if a specific language is really dominating, but we haven't built tools that are localized in that language yet, then how do we make sure that's on the roadmap, right? Because we built all of our tools in English first, because that's what we call our MVP, the simplest version of our product. And then we launch different languages. And so we're always looking at data, make sure that we are launching the next language in the order that makes sense for the company. And that is based on our user base. So just looking at data every single day. And of course, looking at streaming patterns just to understand what types of content are being found. How do we help the content that's not being found get found, and all that.
Oh, that's great. Nina, what type of data do you guys have over at InGroups?
We're looking at obviously data across streaming platforms and like sales numbers and things like that. And we focus in depending on the genre and like the level of the artist or the level of the band, whether it's a developing artist or anything like that. But really, we're really focused on rises, and like that is actually more interesting. So you might look at a number of streams and say, okay, that doesn't really look, that looks normal. That looks like it could be maybe discovered, maybe not. But if you see how recent history, how it's been added, and like we really look at the type of traffic. So we're looking at whether it's active traffic and how it's active, and whether people are going to the profile and actually saving the song, which is a very purposeful, I like this song, I'm going to go listen to it. Kind of we're looking at those sort of data stories because that helps us tell a story to the team. That helps them understand where they are in the market. Because sometimes, you know, the label teams are often quick to understand like when their artist is doing well, when they can see it, but sometimes they don't always know when it's rising. And so Ingrooves actually has something called Songs on the Move, which is like a huge thing that our product team over here works on, which is meant to kind of empower actual independent artist teams and label teams to see very quickly when that's happening. And then we're also using all kinds of, you know, we go directly to the platforms because they all have their own analytic sides of things where you can look and see how well things are performing. And then we also have kind of a myriad of different sites and subscriptions that we use where they synthesize data across different platforms. They'll look at and see how the artist network is growing, maybe in the industry, whether they're getting a lot of press, how things are changing for them, so that we can really have a good full story. Because the best position for us to be in, especially in commercial strategy, is to understand the audience and the artist and like the story they're trying to tell and where they fit and who likes them. And so those are the kind of numbers, not to get too specific, that we are focused on.
I mean, I could talk data all day because that's my vibe. But before we hop over to Theo to kind of see what he's digging into on the day-to-day, just a reminder, we'll have Q&A in a little bit. So make sure to drop your questions in the Q&A tab. And Theo, take it away. What data are we looking at over at TIDAL?
Sure. Yeah. Definitely, I would say a great amalgamation of both Soy and Nina shared. When thinking about our emerging artist program, we're looking at some pretty similar patterns, you know, on the streaming side, save rates, you know, sales numbers, social metrics, paid ad spends, also adjacent sort of streaming metrics on other streaming platforms when we're looking at how we want to or can best support an emerging artist. So we're also looking at their audience demographics and things like that, and just general market trends to sort of inform our marketing strategies. But some of those things are all crucial for us when we think about, you know, setting aside dedicated spends to support a release that they have coming up, or ways that we can support them on an upcoming tour, so on and so forth. We like to take a more sort of agnostic approach when looking at not only their performance on our platform, but also holistically in the market. So, yeah.
That's great. Let's keep it moving. How do you stay updated with the latest trends and developments in the music industry, and how does this influence your work? We'll start with Soy.
I do this 3 different ways largely. One is I am truly a fan of music. So I am looking and seeing what other artists are creating, what they're releasing, what they're saying. Love being part of the communities of some of these artists, but also just observing and learning. And I'm always trying to listen to music from different countries and different languages every single month, because it's truly globalizing. And so one way is just to truly be a fan. The second way is I read a lot of trades. And this is because I think it's really important to remember that your company is just one small part of a huge ecosystem. And so I'm really fascinated to understand what are the general business trends, you know, what companies are striking out, what companies being merged, why are companies investing in certain areas, and why are they just choosing not to, and why are they pulling back? And so those are really interesting at like a macro level. And then the third is also just honestly talking to friends and asking them, what are they working on? What are their challenges? What have they launched recently? What have they seen? Because again, I only will see a lot of what's happening at Spotify, but I'm aware that my friends are a really great way to understand and learn, because they're all spread out across some various functions. And so it's like a 3-pronged approach, I guess.
Oh, that's really good. Theo, how about you? How do you stay updated?
A lot of the same, really. A lot of trade publications. Some of the, I think the go-tos that come to mind: Music Business Worldwide, of course. Platform and Stream. The Lev Sets Letter. I'm sure Soy and Nina can think of a couple of others. Hits Daily Double, of course. That's a great sort of rumor mill, if you will, to keep track of what's happening in the major label space for the most part. Same thing too, actually immersing yourself into the culture, into the community, attending music events. That's why hopefully everyone's getting into music in the first place, is because they're genuine fans of whichever artist. I happen to be a sucker for the Backstreet Boys, always have been, among so many others. We don't have to get on a tangent on that, but yeah, attending music events, engaging with artists to the extent that you can, and of course just other industry professionals and just my peers, really. Candidly, I'm excited to hopefully do some more networking with Nina and Soy and Britnee after this. So it's the little things like that. Yeah.
Nina, anything to add?
It's a lot of what Soy and Theo mentioned. I really do get a lot of the news from my own community. I'm on the R&B, hip hop, and reggae team at my job. Genre team is what we call it, and we kind of meet every so often and share ideas, and also people from different teams can kind of take that information back, and we're all very much in the loop about what's happening within the kind of subgenres that we listen to, and so that kind of is a bit organic. I'm able to stay posted that way, and then also part of my requirement is to keep our team updated on what's happening with my platform specifically, which is Spotify. And then our team gets together and we all have these meetings where we discuss what changes are happening. And so chances are, like, if one platform raises a subscription price, a lot of the others might follow and do the same thing. And so a lot of that is honestly through work and like all the different channels that we stay connected with and keep each other updated through. I've also been subscribed to a newsletter called Motive Unknown for a very long time. And they're really good on like the kind of the cups of music and tech specifically, which is where I've always worked since graduating college. And so they've been great at kind of keeping track of the exact news that is very relative to what I do. And so that's one of the ways I also try to stay abreast of things.
Yeah, these are very good resources for those that are watching and taking notes. We are going to wind down this part before we move into Q&A. Is there anything that we did not touch on that you as a panelist want to be like, one more minute, let me just like drop this bit of knowledge for everyone? I'm going to give everybody the open floor to just kind of be like, I have a minute and a half to tell you this one thing. Anything?
I mean, there's been so much synergy, I think, amongst the four of us, as far as where we're getting information, how we found success. I've honestly just been inspired by everyone else's responses, I have to say.
Oh, that's great. Okay. All right. Going once, going twice. We do have a few questions. So I will start with the question from Daniela. What standout experiences have you had during your time in your respective roles? Whoever's ready to go first.
One thing that popped out to me was during the pandemic, working very closely with independent artists and independent labels. I kind of got to see up close a bit how much it impacted them, especially when they were not able to go on performance, go out and tour. At the time I was on the video side of things, so I was YouTube was my main day-to-day account, and there were a lot of things they were doing to try to get people to do performances at home and monetize that, but that's not the same as hitting the road and getting that check from touring. And so I think that was a very big experience to me, because we say all the time internally, I think that we should all kind of remember that, we're not at a hospital, trying to get blood transfusions. This is very important work, but, we have to keep that in mind, like how people are impacted. And that was actually an up close realization of how people are really impacted by the industry and what changes and what doesn't. And like really kind of put a little bit of a fire in my belly as far as like how I want to help artists and like the kind of what brought me into working in the space in the first place. So that was a standout experience for me.
All right. Another analytics question from Sahil. What third-party tools do you guys use to track analytics and see streaming trends?
I can throw in a little shameless plug on the TIDAL side. In May, we just launched TIDAL Artist Home, which is our brand new dashboard for artists. It's an exciting opportunity to check on their analytics and their performance on our platform, update their bio, imagery, and what we would call their likeness more formally. And we're also in the middle of working on a number of new tabs and features within that platform. So a little shameless plug there for those who also are artists or work with artists. But beyond that too, even from my management days, go-to platform that's relatively accessible is Chartmetric, of course, as well. They do a fantastic job of aggregating data across different DSPs, social media platforms, and so on. So there's one for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say at Spotify, we're obviously building out and looking at Spotify for artists every day. So I don't tend to look at a ton of third party. But I will say when I was doing digital marketing at Columbia Records, they were looking at every single platform's analytics, right? So whether it's YouTube, Google Analytics, your TikTok, your Instagram growth. We had something called Sprout Social, which kind of aggregated all the socials. We also had our own in-house proprietary tech that actually brought in all the information from every single DSP. I miss that view all the time. But yeah, it's kind of I think depending on where you end up being, you'll find that that company has often invested in its own resource because data is that important.
All right, and our last audience question, how do you see royalties for artists shifting in streaming? We'll start with Nina.
That is a tough one. I think it's kind of hard to predict. Honestly, it's certainly in some ways a tug back and forth in many different directions as far as like how things will end up. I will say, personally, I would hope to see that the shift go in the direction of where artists, not just artists who are selling millions of streams, doing kind of doing stadium tours and all that, not just tier A artists, but artists who are developing, be able to find some sort of sustainability from that. And even if it's not through streaming, I do think there should be more sustainability from streaming. I would hope for more of that, but just other ways online to sort of plug their audience and actually make a living from music, because that's important.
Absolutely. Anyone else have like something in their crystal ball?
I think that the education around royalties will improve. So this isn't necessarily about the calculation or how much people are being paid, but I think that more and more artists are now understanding that they would like to better understand how they're getting paid, when they're getting paid, and where they're getting paid. And it's great, right? Because in the past, artists didn't have this much access to information just about related to anything in their careers. But I have found that across the board, Spotify included, we're all working to make sure that artists and their teams have all the information they need at their disposal so that they can grow and they can learn. And that's what just really excites me about the future of that whole area related to streaming.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody, for joining.